Thank you, Stuart.
Yeah, I'm here, thanks.
I will now take the sediment by roll call. I understand that the following members are present: Councillors Alex Allison, Councillor John Bradley, with apologies from Councillor Arch Buchanan. Also apologies from Councillor Stephanie Callaghan. Councillor Anderson, you in attendance? Also present, Councillor Margaret Cowie. Councillor Peter Craig.
Present.
Understand that Councillor Maureen Devlin is present. Councillor Mary Donnelly. Councillors Dorman, Driver, Hamilton are present. We have apologies from Councillor Ian Harrow. Understand that Councillor Wark is attending as a substitute. Also, Councillors Mark Horsham, LeBlond, Lennon, Lockhart are all present. We have apologies from Councillor Lowe. Councillors McLaughlin, Nealon and Nugent are all present. Councillor John Ross. Councillor Scott and Shearer are present. Councillor Colette Stevenson. We have apologies from Councillor Thompson. Understand Councillor Brogan is in attendance as a substitute. And Councillor Jim Wartaw is also in attendance. Thank you, and I will now pass you back to the Chair for today's business.
Chair, just to say I've joined the meeting late on my phone. Councillor Anderson, substituting for Councillor Callaghan.
Chair, I've joined the meeting too. Councillor Donnelly.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Do we have any declarations of interest? No, can we agree the minutes of the previous meeting? Submitted as approval, but as a correct record, and that's in pages 5 to 12.
Agreed, Chair.
Okay, agreed, thank you. Moving on to agenda item 3, that's application P201749. That's in pages 13 to 38. And Tony's going to take us through that item. Thank you, Tony.
Yes, thank you, Chair. So this is a detailed application relating to what's mainly agricultural grazing land, located around 500 metres to the west of the settlement of Boghead. And to the south of the site is the operational Dundove Quarry. A map showing the context of the site in relation to Boghead and other surrounding properties is found on page 38 of the papers. So planning permission is sought for the erection of 2 wind turbines with a maximum tip height of 100 metres, together with a 2 megawatt battery storage unit, associated electricity infrastructure and ancillary access track. The proposals would use the one-way system currently operated by the adjacent quarry to access onto the B7086 public road. In terms of the planning history of the site, an application for the erection of 3 100-metre wind turbines and associated infrastructure was refused by Planning Committee on the 23rd of June last year. The reasons for refusal were based on the unacceptable visual and cumulative impact on the landscape character and visual amenity of the area. Secondly, the unacceptable impact on the visual and residential amenity of residents of Boghead, nearby dwelling houses. Thirdly, that the proposals would result in shadow flicker for a significant number of properties, and appropriate mitigation hadn't been proposed at that point by the applicant. And finally, that the proposals would have an adverse impact on aviation safety. And again, appropriate mitigation hadn't been proposed to address that matter. So that decision was then subject of an appeal to Scottish ministers. The reporter who heard the appeal dismissed the appeal and maintained the refusal of planning permission. However, in reaching that decision, the reporter did not agree with all of the council's reasons for refusal and based their decision on the proposal having an unacceptably detrimental effect on living conditions of a number of properties in Boghead, due to the visually dominant and overbearing presence of the turbines. So I'll return to this when I present the summary of the assessment of the application later on. So the applicant then has now submitted this new application for 2 turbines. The 2 turbines were part of the original application, with the turbine closest to bulkhead removed, and the proposal also involves now the addition of the battery storage element. So consultation responses are set out in section 4 of the report. The responses received from consultees largely reflect their position at the time of the first application. Would note, however, that National Air Traffic Systems Limited, or NATS, are maintaining their objection on the grounds of aviation safety in terms of the impact of the turbines upon the radar system that they use. However, we are aware that the applicant has submitted evidence demonstrating that they're in advanced discussions with NATS on agreeing appropriate mitigation. And given the reporter's view and this work that's being carried out by the applicants, if the application was granted, then this matter could be dealt with by a suspensive condition. In response to publicity and neighbour notification, 41 letters of objection have been submitted. The grounds for objection are summarised in section 5 of the report. Now, they generally reflect the concerns raised during the first application, which were considered by the council and by the reporter dealing with the appeal. And a response to each of those points is set out in the report. In addition to that, 14 letters of support of the application have also been received. So turning to the assessment, as mentioned earlier, the earlier application for 3 turbines of 100 metres height was refused by the council less than 12 months ago on the grounds of the adverse effect on landscape character, the detrimental visual impact on local residents, the impact of shadow flicker and air traffic safety. So I've described the views of the reporter on a subsequent appeal against each of those 4 reasons for refusal. In terms of the impact on landscape character, the reporter concluded that the 3 turbines proposed at that point would not take the character of this local landscape to the point where it could be described as a wind farm landscape, rather than as it is now, a landscape in which turbines are a prominent but not a dominant element. So the conclusion was that the proposal would not unacceptably affect landscape character. The reporter also found that the proposal for the 3 turbines, given the presence of other turbines and pylons within the immediate vicinity, would ensure no unacceptable visual amenity effects. So in view of this position, the fact that the proposals currently would in fact result in a reduction in the number of turbines from 3 to 2, it's considered that on balance, the proposals would not have a significant detrimental impact upon landscape character, and therefore would not be a reason to refuse planning permission in this case. The reporter also took the view that the issues of shadow flicker and the impact on air safety could both be dealt with by a suspensive condition. If committee was minded to grant consent today, those matters could be dealt with by condition. So in relation to the 4th and final reason for refusal, which was the effect on the residential amenity of residents, the reporter agreed with the council's view that the turbines would be visually dominant and have an overbearing impact. The applicant has sought to address that matter by reducing the number of turbines to 2 in number, with the closest turbine removed. However, an assessment of this revised scheme considers that the current proposals would still dominate and overwhelm the village of Boghead, and that at a height of 100 metres to tip on an elevated position, they would create an overbearing presence that would be significantly detrimental to the residential amenity of Boghead. So it's therefore considered the proposals do not constitute appropriate development of this scale and in this location. So in view of this, the conclusion is still that the proposals are unacceptable, albeit solely this time on the basis of the impact on the residential and visual amenity of local residents. As a result, even though the other reasons for refusal in the original application have been addressed, it's considered that the effects on local residents would be so significant that the application is contrary to planning policy, and therefore the recommendation is to refuse consent.
Thank you, Tony. Any questions or comments for Tony? I'll move the report.
I'll second it, Chair.
Agree the report?
Agreed.
Thank you.
Great.
Thank you. Agenda item 4, application P210395, and that's in pages 39 to 46. And Tina will take us through the item. Thank you, Tina.
Thank you, Chair. This is a planning application for a change of use at Oven Feast Limited at 214 Main Street, Cambuslang. The property was last occupied, from our information, in July 2019. The application site is located at 214 Main Street, which is at central Cambuslang on the main road, obviously. There are other commercial properties close to the unit, with a bookmakers on one side and a cake shop and a chemist on the other side to the west. In terms of Consultees, we've consulted environmental services and our roads colleagues, and neither have any objections subject to conditions. We've also consulted economic development services, and they're encouraging the reuse of a vacant unit for it to be occupied. They've also commented there's an environmental scheme underway in Cambuslang, and it won't have any detrimental effect on or any conflict with that particular scheme. So they're supportive of the proposal. In terms of objections and representations, we have received 20 letters of objection and a petition attached to one of these letters. The main issue really is has been raised by local residents is the number of takeaway premises that exist in the area. However, in response, and we've looked at it quite carefully, it is a town centre use in a town centre location. There's no specific policy that would specifically require it to be retail, and there's a mixture of uses in the town centre. Prior to COVID, the occupancy rate, I'm advised, was approximately 92%, but we don't have figures since then. In terms of as a use, though, we wouldn't be able to take into consideration from a planning point of view the number of takeaways. However, there is a good mixture in Cambuslang at the moment. Therefore, turning to our conclusions, we've looked at it in terms of a commercial use within the town centre, which, as I've said, is acceptable. We've also looked at any potential impact on residential amenity, but this is a single-storey property within Cambuslang Main Street. There are no flats above or on either side. So given that there's no residential properties close by, we don't think there'll be any impact on amenity. And there will be, if it was approved, there is a ventilation scheme has been submitted in terms of the flue to the rear, and also the new bins and refuge details. So that would all be conditioned and required, and therefore recommending approval for the change of use.
Thank you, Tina. Any questions or comments for Tina? Lynn?
Yes, thank you, Chair. I know you've said it's not a planning consideration, Tina, but when you walk up and down Cambuslang Main Street, it's more than every alternate shop seems to be a takeaway, and there are issues with the bins. The parts of the pavement are very narrow, and there seems to be frequently a surplus of food refuse left at the side of the bins, attracting vermin. So maybe something we could look at moving forward with a view in terms of health as well. People eating fast food, maybe not always necessarily the healthiest option, could maybe take a look at provision in another way. Thank you.
Thank you, Lynn. There's another hand up, Stuart, but I don't know whose it is. It's Pauline.
It's mine, Chair. Just to respond to Councillor Nealon's comment, I mean, South Lanarkshire Council doesn't have any control over commercial waste. That is down to the individual businesses. I do get Councillor Nealon's point that the pavement in Cambuslang, unlike some of our Victorian town centres, there aren't a lot of back alley spaces for businesses to store their bins, and that's just the design of the street. But it is a matter for the individual businesses to take responsibility for their own waste, albeit the council is encouraging them to share waste contractors so that the waste is all taken away coterminously. But the other issue is in terms of waste in Cambuslang Main Street, it's anecdotal, but some of the worst offenders are not the food takeaways. I get there is a particular issue with vermin around food waste, but there is some of the beauty businesses are not necessarily acting as they should. But again, Environmental Health have no objections, Chair, so we couldn't really refuse on those grounds. Thanks.
Thank you, Pauline. Any other questions or comments?
There's no other hands raised, Chair.
Okay, I'll move the report.
I'll second that.
Agree the report?
Agreed.
Thank you. Agenda item 5, application P191462, and that's in pages 47 to 62, and Bernard will take us through that item. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. The application seeks permission for the formation of a residential caravan site along with associated works at the Rob Roy Caravan Park in Crawford. The application site is currently used as a touring caravan site and lies in the eastern edge of Crawford between Carlisle Road and the A702 within the Crawford settlement boundary. It comprises a mixture of grass and hard standing at present and contains a number of small buildings which provide on-site facilities for caravan users. Vehicular access is taken from Carlisle Road. The proposal would involve 30 two-bedroom static caravans being installed on site for permanent residential accommodation. Each caravan would have 2 parking spaces, external decking and a small grassed area. Within the site, there would be communal refuse and recycling provision, communal parking and a fuel compound. There will also be a marketing suite which would be used as a site manager's accommodation. The woodland tree belt along the northern boundary will be retained for screening. In terms of the local plan, the site is identified as part of the existing urban area, and the principle of this type of development raises no policy issues. The consultation responses are summarised in section 4 of the report, and no objections have been raised, subject to the use of appropriate conditions. There have been 3 letters of objection, and the issues raised are summarised in section 5 of the report. The main issues relate to access and traffic, impact on amenity and safety as a result of the development. In terms of assessing the proposal, it will result in the redevelopment of a touring caravan site within the settlement of Crawford for the purpose of providing and meeting a demand for static caravan accommodation on a permanent basis rather than for temporary use. It is anticipated that there will be positive impacts on the surrounding area, particularly in terms of economic benefit. The proposed use raises no land use issues and no objections have been raised through the consultation process. The impact on the amenity of the surrounding area from the development is considered to be acceptable. The proposal represents an appropriate form of residential development at this location, and it is therefore recommended that planning permission is granted, subject to conditions.
Thank you, Bernard. Mary, you've got your hand up?
It's just a question on the proposed caravan site. What amenities are going to be there for like shops, for people to buy local milk, bread, butter kind of thing? Or is the local town very near for people to be able to do that?
Bernard?
Thank you, Chair. It's within the settlement boundary of Crawford, so there's not a specific provision going to be on site, so the expectation is that they would be able to walk or drive, however they prefer to access these facilities locally.
Thank you. Peter?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I'm actually very supportive of this kind of development for a rural area. Tourism is a side of our whole area, which is very much underdeveloped, and I think this is going to help develop that and bring some economic activity to the rural area. So really very pleased with that. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you. Don't see any other hands up. I'll move the report.
I'll second it, Chair.
Agree the report?
Agreed.
Thank you. Agenda item 6, application P210074, and that's on pages 63 to 72. And Tony will take us through that item. Thank you, Tony.
Yes, thanks, Chair. So this report relates to a retrospective application for advertisement consent, and it's for the installation of an illuminated advertising panel that's being displayed on the fascia of a convenience store at 30 Westport in Lanark. The convenience store, it's a single-storey flat roof building. It sits immediately adjacent to a petrol filling station forecourt, which is available 24 hours via unmanned pumps. And the two businesses share the same vehicle access and exit from the site. The site sits parallel to the A73, which is the main road through the town, leading to Lanark Town Centre. So the application seeks retrospective consent for the display of the advertising panel. It faces onto the petrol station forecourt and southwest along the A73. LED lighting is incorporated into the panel, which enables the display of different and alternating adverts. It measures 3 metres wide, 1 metre in height, and has a depth of 0.18 metres. In terms of consultation responses, Road and Transportation Services have no objections on road safety grounds in terms of the effect on the signs on drivers, while Environmental Services also have no objections subject to conditions. Statutory enablement of notification and publicity wasn't required to be carried out in this case. However, 7 letters of objection were received on the grounds of which are summarised in section 5 of the report. And in addition, 6 letters of support of the application were also received. And I'll cover those points in the assessment as I go on to that. So just turning to that then, the panel that's been attached to the store, it's alongside an adjoining petrol filling station. So it already exhibits a range of signage. And the site's also on the A73, which also includes street signage and lighting. The scale and size are considered proportionate to the convenience store. The panel's design and material, including the LED lighting, is appropriate for the convenience store's commercial setting. In terms of visual impact, it doesn't over-dominate its immediate context, nor the wider residential area, and it wouldn't result in visual clutter. So therefore, the impact on visual amenity of the area is considered acceptable. Digital advertising does have the potential to impact on public safety by virtue of causing distraction to road users, but taking this into consideration, roads were consulted on the application and provided no objections. So therefore, the panel does not result in an adverse impact on road safety. The panel is installed on the fascia of the convenience store and it faces directly into the petrol station forecourt. It doesn't face directly onto any residential properties. Concerns about the level of luminance permeating into local or nearby homes from the LED lighting have been raised by objectors. And previously, the panel didn't, when it was first erected, the panel didn't utilise a light sensor to control its brightness, which probably explains why the light pollution was experienced by local residents. Environmental Services have been consulted and they don't object to the application, as I said, but that's subject to conditions establishing the maximum permitted luminance of the display and also measures to investigate complaints about light pollution if they are received by the council. The applicant has confirmed that the panel will continue now to have a light sensor to control its brightness according to the ambient light conditions, and that will ensure that the brightness doesn't exceed threshold values suggested by Environmental Services in their consultation response. So as such, the luminance of the adverts will only be so bright as is necessary to be visible and legible over the ambient light conditions. So provided the conditions that are suggested by Environmental Services are adhered to, we're happy that the panel won't have any significant adverse impact on the amenity of nearby residents. So it's been concluded, therefore, that the proposals are acceptable, they comply with planning policy, and the recommendation, therefore, is to grant advertisement consent.
Thank you, Tony. Any questions or comments for Tony? Is that Councillor Warto, Jim?
Yeah, this is a retrospective application. You have the new, as the new system come into effect yet, where we are allowed to charge extra for retrospective applications, and if so, has that been done in this case?
Yeah, through you, Chair, I can answer that, Councillor Warto. Yes, the 2019 Planning Act does give or does allude to fee regulations being amended to allow us to charge double the normal application fee for a retrospective application. There was a consultation on planning fees early last year on a wide range of matters, including that one. And if members remember, we brought that to committee and got committee approval to respond to the Scottish Government. However, we did hear from the Chief Planner late last year that the work on planning fees and discretionary charging has been put on hold while we get through the COVID situation. So not at the moment, Councillor Wardle, but I suspect once we get through this current pandemic, then it'll be revisited and hopefully enacted.
Thank you, Tony. Richard?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Tony, yeah, you know this guy, there's a long history here, and there's probably a little bit more than meets the eye with this application, if you don't know. He is a man who is entrepreneurial. He's made, I think, quite a good living out of this shop. The problem with him is he basically ignores the council, and he always has ignored the council. He does what he wants, waits for people to complain, and then when the council come in and have a look and investigate, they actually do respond to the complaints. They alter opening hours and things to help people, but he continues to ignore them. That is the problem that I have with this guy. And this sign is just another example. Do it, to hell with it. The council will row into line eventually. And I guess that the neighbours have had enough. And there's one disingenuous bit about this, which is where the sign is. The sign on the drawings looks as though it faces at 90 degrees to the road. It doesn't. It faces more like 45 degrees. And there's a couple of houses undoubtedly there who have got flashing lights, if you like, showing in their bedrooms when this thing is firing off all hours of the day and night. But all the day, it doesn't matter. But to be honest, I have a problem with the way the guy operates with the council, and I get fed up with the fact that he just expects us to row into line every time he clicks his fingers and just decides to disobey things for long enough that the council gives in. I don't think you can stop the sign because it's what it is and it's where it is, but I do think we can impose conditions and you can switch the flaming thing off during the hours of darkness, full stop. And I would, I'm afraid, refuse permission for this unless he is prepared to agree to abide by that rule, which he won't because he never does anyway. But I think he should have conditions put on this, I'm afraid. So I'm objecting to this application on the basis that it's as it sits at the moment and require him to switch the sign off during the hours of darkness.
Pauline Elliott?
Thanks, Chair. Councillor Lockhart, page 71 of your papers, there are conditions controlling luminance, and also the sign is only allowed to be illuminated within 8 AM and 8 PM. So those conditions already exist. I do take your point about retrospective applications. I know members aren't particularly happy with these. Just going back to Councillor Wardhaw's earlier comments about being able to charge additional fees when we have retrospective applications. I would like that very much, because I think I may already have mentioned to members that since the start of the COVID pandemic, our enforcement caseload has gone up by more than 33%. Now, I think a combination of that is people doing things that they shouldn't. You know, we've got a lot of people building large garden sheds, summer houses, that kind of thing, doing stuff in their garden because they can't do other stuff. And also because people are in their houses, they're around their neighbourhood more than they perhaps normally are. They've run out of stuff to watch on Netflix, so then they start writing to planning, and because they're noticing what their neighbours are doing. So I share your frustration. I'm very much looking forward to being able to increase our fee income because, joking apart, it's a huge amount of extra work, and I think members are aware we've only got 3 enforcement officers to cover the whole of South Lanarkshire, and 2 of those officers, while very good planning officers, are relatively new and inexperienced, and they're kind of learning their trade. But to answer your query, Councillor Lockhart, there are conditions posed on it. Had the applicant come up front and asked for permission before erecting the sign, the recommendation would have been the same. So on that basis, we can't refuse it, or I don't feel we can refuse it. Obviously, it's a matter for members. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you, Pauline. Richard, do you want to come back in?
Yes, please. Yes, I take the point, Pauline. I see the conditions, but I think 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. also is too much. I mean, the reality is in Scotland it's dark from about 5 o'clock till heavens above 8 o'clock the next morning. So my view is that it should be restricted to, for instance, to 8 p.m. to 6 p.m. or something like that. But again, I also think that we need to keep an eye on the guy. What he'll do is what he wants to do, and he will ignore any restrictions that we put in him, as he has demonstrated, certainly to my knowledge, for the last 3 years. So I don't know whether you can put a caveat saying that if he doesn't adhere to the restrictions, whatever they are, they will be withdrawn. I don't know whether that is within our power.
Thank you, Richard. Mary?
Yeah, I'm taking up one of the points that Richard actually alluded to there, which gives me a bit of concern that the way that his digital advertising screens are positioned where they're flashing into neighbours' windows. Can we check I'm not sure the language here, so please, I'll apologise before I even speak. The 45-degree angle that Richard was talking about. So can we check the angle that this digital advertising is at, so as it does not shine in neighbours' windows? Because I think, personally, tell me if I'm wrong, Pauline, I think we've got a duty of care to the people round about there.
I think I'm going to ask Tony to come back in here, because Environmental Health have checked this, but Tony can tell you.
Yeah. Yes, thanks, Chair. Councillor Donnelly, yes, the sign has been erected so that it does face at 45 degrees, but it doesn't shine directly into the houses across the other side of the road. So we're satisfied that there won't be a direct negative impact for residents. The conditions that we've talked about and the environmental services are suggesting, the luminance thresholds, that relates back to their guidance, and they're quite satisfied that if those luminance levels are adhered to, there won't be an adverse effect on the immediate residents. If there is, then we've got that caveat, that fallback position of being able to, first of all, get the applicant to investigate what's happened and to mitigate it. And if they can't, then that third condition then kicks in, which means they have to switch it off between 8 and 8. So I think there's enough control built in there to give the applicant the opportunity to advertise, but also to make sure there's not an adverse impact on residents.
Chair, can I come back?
Yes, Mary?
Just to say then, can we get that check? Because Richard's alluding to the fact that it is shining in people's windows, and I'm a bit concerned about that. Well,
just so you, Chair, to Councillor Donnelly, Environmental Services, when we consulted them, they would have visited the site and they would have taken account of the circumstances there. So we've got the plans, we've got the sign erected, so we're satisfied that there's no direct lighting impact on the residents across the road. So why am I getting conflict from what Richard's saying to what you're saying? Well, the sign, it doesn't directly shine into properties. It shines into the petrol forecourt and also onto the public road, but there's no direct lighting impact on those residences across the road. I mean, I would say as well that Lanark Road, the A73, is quite a wide road, and the houses that we're talking about are quite set well back from that road. So the distance is quite significant. So I'd be surprised if there is an impact on them. But as I say, the conditions that we're suggesting would help address any problems or any issues like pollution issues that the residents encounter.
Okay. Thank you, Tony. I think, is it Walter wants to come back in?
Oh, right. Me or who?
Yeah, please.
Okay.
In terms of the charges that have been delayed, given the COVID situation, it's not likely to clear up for probably years. Can we not implement that on our own prior to any Scottish Government say so.
Pauline?
Councillor Brogan, that's a good question. Some local authorities do, even though it isn't yet enshrined in Scottish planning law. Our own lawyers are saying that we can't. They are being perhaps more risk averse than other authorities. I obviously can't do something that my legal colleagues tell me is unlawful at the present time, although as the council's budgetary position gets tighter, it is something I am pursuing because other authorities are doing it more each year actually, and obviously they're not being challenged, but I don't think it will be years before they are implemented. I think Scottish Government are starting to look at it again. I'm fairly confident that within the next 12 months we'll be in a position where we're lawfully able to increase our charges in a number of areas, including additional fees for retrospective applications. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you, Pauline. Walter, you want to come back in?
Yes, please. Well, given this is a repeat offender, can we not have some exceptions to that?
I wish we could, Chair. I look at my planning budget and I really wish we could, but no, not at the moment. But I'm hopeful for the future. Thanks, Chair.
Thanks, Pauline. Richard?
Well, I'd just like to come back. I would disagree with whatever your people have looked at, Tony. I've been to that house. I've been there at night, and I'm afraid that you can see a pinprick 30 miles away of light. Light is an unfortunately intrusive thing, and light pollution is a well-known problem. And I would say that maybe it's only two houses, but certainly one or two houses, despite being across the other side of the road and set back a bit. I've been there at night, and I never said I would do anything more than I would just raise the point. But it's pretty intrusive, that flashing. And it's just one of these things. I'll go with the flow because obviously no one else is going to get that exercised about it. But I feel that we need to have a very clear sanction with this guy. The only thing he understands is the cricket bat approach. And you've got to somehow lay down the law that says if he breaks those rules, sorry lad, lights switched off, that's it. And I don't feel that the sanctions are strong enough, or if they are, they're never applied because he breaks the law all the time.
Pauline?
Chair, I know members feel very strongly about this. I mean, and I've often said to you at committee that unfortunately planning enforcement is a somewhat blunt instrument. Our environmental health colleagues, however, do have stronger powers, and at the moment they are happy with the luminescence, and the report does say this will be monitored. I mean, the only thing I can suggest, if you feel that strongly, Councillor Lockhart, is to propose an amendment, as you've already alluded to restrict the hours of luminescence of the sign from maybe 8 till 8 till 8 till 6, and see if you get support from the committee to do that. I can, say that if there is an issue moving forward that the sign is brighter than is said here, that we could, our environmental health could keep an eye on that. But just going back to comments Tony made, it is an existing petrol filling station and shop on a main road that already has other signage, and this is a small additional sign, so it may be a bridge too far, but just to point out, and it is a main road that the houses are some distance away. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you, Pauline. Richard, do you want to come back in?
No, I'll leave it there. I mean, I don't want to waste everyone's time with a vote because it's very much a local issue. I just would like to make sure that it is actually properly enforced.
Okay, thank you. And there's another hand up, I think, Stuart, but I don't know whose it is.
Councillor McLaughlin, Chair.
Thank you. Davy?
Thank you, Chair. I know this has had quite a bit of discussion now, but I'm interested because I've got a situation in my own ward, albeit I've not had any complaints about it, but I have noticed it myself. And it's some signage outside one of the shops in the hot food capital in this area in my ward in Burnbank, Glasgow Road, Burnbank. The hot food shops have got illuminated signage, just like the petrol station Pauline's mentioned. But there's one in particular that it actually frightens the life out of my dog when I walk past it. And I look across the road at the houses, and the whole side of the building is completely illuminated and flashing. in accordance to this sign across the road. And I hate to imagine what it might be like if you were an early bedder trying to get a night's sleep in some of these properties. So on the detail of the planning, I think Tony mentioned, was it page 71? Yes. I don't know what those figures mean. The maximum permitted luminance of the display shall be 600 CDM squared compared to 300 during low light. I don't know what that means in terms of how bright that is to look at. And I wonder how many other situations we have like this. It's the first time we've seen this come into planning committee, but I wonder how many other places actually have problems like this. And I know Pauline just mentioned here that enforcement is a big issue because we just don't have, I think we've got one in Fort Richard Smith is probably the only enforcement officer we've got, having to cover a very large area. But if things like this are going on and people are just accepting it, this could maybe explain why Richard is experiencing this guy up here, just in Richard's words, not mine, that this guy just does what he likes. So I wonder if this is maybe a bigger problem than people realise, just because maybe people aren't aware that there are restrictions on what the lighting is. So, Pauline, what I'm trying to ask you is then, just to cut to the chase, how common is it that we get complaints or concerns about the brightness of illuminated signs at shops or garages or whatever? Is it normally a big issue, or is it something that's pretty rare?
It's fairly common, and obviously it is when we go through the planning application process. It is something that is taken into account. I mean, I have to tell you, I don't really understand the data in the report either, but it's acceptable light levels, downtown environmental health colleagues. Unfortunately, we don't regularly have an environmental health colleague at planning committee to explain to you in detail, but they basically look and say, is that light level acceptable or not? They also, when it's noisy, measure it in decibels and it's above a certain standard, I believe set by the World Health Organization. When we go through a planning process, it is something that is taken into account. And if, Councillor, you want to email me separate from the committee about the sign and burn ban that you're referring to, we can get that checked out for you and see if there's anything we or our environmental health colleagues can do to control that. Obviously, if the light is shining directly into somebody's house, that is different from a sign on a main road with the houses some way away. And I'm not downplaying the fact that this may have a light impact on the neighbours. I'm just going back to the thing we always say, every planning application on its own merits. And just to say, we do have 3 planning enforcement officers for the whole of South Lanarkshire, albeit we were without one for a considerable time last year, as one retired and we've had ill health and had to be replaced. All very good officers. It's a big patch, and 2 of them are newish officers, and they're learning the patch and learning the job. So they're doing well, but I go back to the previous remarks I made about our cases being up greatly during COVID and a big caseload to cover. Thanks, Chair.
Chair, can I come back in just to ask Pauline one quick question? And just on the papers on page 71, does the lighting at this location meet with this guidance here, 600 during the day and 300 at night? Is that being checked? Tony,
come in.
Yeah. The luminance levels that have been suggested by environmental services, they're based on guidelines and standards that environmental services use under the environmental protection legislation, and they're satisfied that those levels, if they're established, then there shouldn't be an impact on the amenity of residents. I'm not quite sure whether when went out to visit the site whether they took measurements or not. I'll certainly find that out. Because it might be that if that is the case, then we can take action, or we can ask the applicant to mitigate what's happening, as accordance with the condition that we're talking about.
Chair, I'm bound to come back in again. So, is it not worth considering this application once we know that has been checked before we grant consent? Because I think it's worthwhile, if that's a measurement and it's a guidance, and environmental services officers can check it. Is it perhaps worth delaying a decision on this application until that has been checked, and maybe give Richard some comfort?
So you're moving deferral, David?
I'm not. I'm asking the question, and I wonder. I mean, it's miles from where I live, and I know that it's obviously frustrating for Richard, and he said he doesn't want to take up too much time by taking it to a vote. But I think deferring it until we have solid information rather than taking a vote yes or no. I'll put that out there for, I don't know if maybe Richard wanted to respond, but it's just a view, Chair. I'm not making a motion, no.
Pauline?
Chair, obviously members can defer the application, or bearing in mind it's a retrospective application, the sign's still there, and we wouldn't be taking enforcement action pending the final decision being made. If members are broadly happy to grant it, and we undertake to get environmental health just to go out and double check, but you can go both ways, members, it's up to you, but bear in mind the sign is there and will be operating pending a decision. It's not like you're deferring the sign being in situ, if you know what I mean. Thanks, Chair.
Chair, I'm sorry, but I need to come back in here because thanks very much, Pauline, for your input. But we're here as a committee to make decisions based on guidance and recommendations and what we feel is right or wrong. But I'm sorry, Pauline, but that doesn't really answer my question. We could grant this and it gets checked and it's above the guidance and the guy's got the applicant's got consent. Well, based on your response, Chair, sorry, Pauline, Chair, I'm going to make a motion then that we defer this until the lighting levels are checked, because it's not in my ward and it's in Richard's ward, but it could affect everybody because potentially I might have it in my own ward. So yes, based on Pauline, I'm not being facetious here, Pauline, but I think based on that, as a member on the planning committee, I would be more comfortable if something like that was checked before we actually give the agreement for this plan application to be granted. And because it's retrospective, that really shouldn't matter, because those conversations take place a lot of the time where people do something and then they seek retrospective, and it's more, sometimes there's an old saying, sometimes it's easier to seek forgiveness than it is to seek for permission. So I would move, Chair, that the application is deferred until the lighting is examined by Environmental Services.
Okay, thank you. Mary?
Yeah, it didn't answer my question either when I said that there was a conflict of reporting where Richard had said that the light was affecting the neighbours, and I understood from Tony's reply that it had all been checked out and it was fine. So I think we've got a duty of care here, and I think we need to apply that duty of care, and I would be wanting it checked out before we grant this application.
Richard?
Yeah, I think I would second what Davey said. I think I've changed my mind. I tell you why, because I think this goes beyond this particular application. Light pollution is one of the real pests of the modern world. It's a ghastly pest. I think in towns and in urban areas you get used to it because it's daylight the whole time and you never notice another sign. But in rural areas, in urban areas, which are, if you like, people's choice to live in because they are quieter, there's less light pollution, there's less noise, there's less all sorts of things. And then when something comes along, if you like, that is viewed as obtrusive, I don't think we should necessarily apply our urban judgments to something like this without clear, clear establishment of exactly what the ground rules are, and in this case, establishing what the light pollution level is. And I think that that's something which could actually go further and become more enshrined in local planning decisions as to where light pollution sits in these applications generally.
Yeah.
Thank you, Richard. Alec?
I'm a little bit concerned where this is going. I mean, I can understand Richard's point about not wanting about neighbour problems. Look at the conditions. It's giving you a maximum light. It's giving you a maximum time. And if these are breached, quite simply, they has to switch it off. We've already got everything that Davey and Richard are looking for. Unless I'm missing something, but it's already in the conditions.
Thanks, Alec. Yeah. So I'll move the report.
I'll second it, Chair.
And I've
any
moved a
amendments?
deferral, Chair.
Davy put in an amendment, didn't he?
The seconder?
I'm the seconder. Davy put in the amendment. I'm the seconder. As I
Okay,
think
thank you.
it's a bigger issue, particularly as the man himself will just ignore whatever rules we laid out in front of him.
Chair, can I make a point in response to Alex? I hear what you're saying, Alex. We put conditions, but the difference here is this is retrospective. The thing's already there. If somebody was coming with an application, they wanted to put something there, yes, you can do that, but here are the conditions. But it's already in place and it's retrospective, so I think that makes it slightly different. That's why I would suggest not giving it the nod until it has been checked. So that's just in response to Alex's comment here. Thanks, Chair.
Chair?
Sorry, Mary, do you want to come back in?
Yeah, it was just clarification. Tony said he was unsure if it had been checked and he would get that checked. So that's my grey area.
Tony, do you want to come back in?
Yes, to you, Chair. Yes, I'm not sure whether the luminous levels have been checked to make sure that they're meeting the current situation. But as we say, the luminous levels are set out in the condition, and if they're breached, there is a process to investigate that and then to mitigate it if necessary. So I don't think it's particularly necessary at this moment in time to know whether the luminous levels are being achieved or not, because there is that process in place or proposed to be in place.
Thank you, Tony.
Yeah.
We have to move to the vote then, Stuart.
Yep. So if I can just clarify then that the amendment, which has been moved by Councillor McLaughlin and seconded by Councillor Lockhart, is to defer the... Sorry, I think somebody's maybe not got their microphone on mute. Sorry, so it's to defer the application until environmental health check that the condition number 1 is being adhered to. Councillor McLaughlin, Councillor Lockhart, are you quite happy that captures your amendment?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, so if you can move to a vote then, which will be taken by roll call. So again, so the motion moved by Councillor Dorman, seconded by Councillor Horsham, is to grant the application based on conditions. And the amendment is to defer the application until environmental health check that condition 1 is being adhered to, proposed by Councillor McLaughlin, seconded by Councillor Lockhart. Councillor Allison, if you could state your intention, please.
Grant.
Councillor Bradley. Councillor Bradley.
Sorry, I was on mute there when I said it. Motion.
Sorry, I've missed Councillor Anderson, who's substituting.
Motion.
Councillor Brogan.
Defer.
Councillor Cowie.
Defer.
Councillor Craig.
Motion.
Councillor Devlin.
Defer.
Councillor Donnelly. Councillor Donnelly.
I think because I've kind of asked for that clarification, I need to go defer.
Councillor Dorman.
Motion.
Councillor Dryborough.
Defer.
Councillor Hamilton.
Defer.
Councillor Horsham.
Motion.
Councillor LeBlond.
Motion.
Councillor Lennon.
Defer.
Councillor Lockhart.
Defer.
Councillor McLaughlin.
Defer.
Councillor Nayland.
Defer.
Councillor Nugent,
Motion.
Councillor Scott,
Defer.
Councillor Shearer,
Motion.
Councillor Wardhaw,
Defer.
Councillor Wark,
Defer.
Okay, 13 members voted in favour of the amendment and 9 members voted in favour of the motion. I therefore declare the amendment carried.
Thank you, Stuart. Moving on to agenda item 7, and that's application P210295 on pages 73 to 88. And Tina will take us through that one. Thank you, Tina.
Thank you, Chair. This is an amendment to planning consent, as you say, P19-1794. That planning consent was granted by committee back in September last year for the same developer, Stuart Millen Homes at Jackton Road, East Kilbride. The planning application here is really just to change the house types. Overall, it's the same density, the same number of houses, which is 50, and they're substituting house types, different house types. Probably the main change is there was back in September last year a row of terrace houses as part of the development, 7 terrace houses, and they'll be detached. So overall, it's the same number, but different house types, as I say. We lay out the standard local plan policy, but the site is zoned for housing as part of the CGA in East Kilbride. In terms of the Section 75, the Section 75 was signed for the whole community growth area, so contributions will come through for this site like any of the CGA sites, but not required as a separate agreement for this development. In terms of representations, we have received 5 letters of objection and 2 letters of comment, and they relate to the development of the site and development management issues largely, and most, if not all, are covered by condition. Development has started on the site in terms of site preparation based on the consent that was granted back last year. Residents have raised a number of issues which are set out in section 5 of the report. Probably the main issues really have been the removal of a hedge at the site and also some traffic issues there. The sort of 2 main things. In terms of the hedgerow along Eaglesham Road, that was always planned to come away to accommodate the footpath there. From a planning point of view, we always look to see if there is a compromise, but in this case it did require to come away to accommodate the footpath. However, there is a replacement hedge proposed inside the new footway, and we've agreed that with our landscaping colleagues, and that has been approved. In terms of traffic issues, we have a construction management plan which was previously conditioned as well, and the developers are working with roads in relation to that, and there are no objections from our roads colleagues. Therefore, in conclusion, Chair, we're recommending approval. It's minor amendments, change of house types and some other minor amendments across the site, and it's fully in accordance with policy. Recommending grant.
Thank you, Tina. Any questions or comments for Tina? Walter?
Yeah, if we're increasing the quality and therefore the price of the houses, does that mean the developers' contributions should change as well?
Through yourself, Chair, it is a standard roof tax across the whole site. The legal agreement was signed by a number of developers, and we looked at the cost of what they're subsidising in terms of the school and other community benefits. So no, we didn't. It doesn't drill down to the house types for the CGA. It's equalised across the whole site as a plot price.
Thank you, Tina. There's another hand up, Stuart, but I don't know whose it is. Okay, thank you, Fiona.
Thank you, Chair. It was really just to ask Tina then about, it says that the Transport have said that in 4.1 that the conditions that are currently attached to the original consent being attached to amended consent. And I just kind of like to raise, I know it's been raised a couple of times already about conditions, but on a daily basis, I get complaints about conditions not being met in the community growth area. Quite honestly, I'm quite sick of it. It's constant throughout this, all of these planning applications, and Transport have been absolutely brilliant, and they went in and they've had to then, get the conditions met. But I'm kind of confused as to why the conditions aren't met at the start and why Transport are having to go in months down the line when when construction work has already started, and then insist that the conditions are being met, because it's a total mess in my ward, absolute total mess. The muck all over the road, the pavements, and Transport have been brilliant this week. I went in and said that the wheel washing's going to be put in place, but it was already a condition. It should have been in place months ago, and it wasn't. And we're having to fight for the conditions to actually be met. So I'm just kind of, again, this is another one in my ward. I'm just kind of concerned here. Are the conditions going to be enforced? I know Pauline said they haven't got a lot of staff. I totally accept that. So what is the point then of the conditions if we're not even going to check if they're in place?
Thanks, Fiona. Tina, or Pauline, you come in?
I might need Tina. Councillor, we do monitor the conditions up front, but bear in mind the community growth area is a massive building site. There are multiple developers on different parts of this site. We impose conditions, but often the bulk of the work doesn't happen at the start of the development. It ranks up. So, at the beginning they're doing groundwork, they're doing earthworks. Depending on the piece of work being done on the different part of the site, there might be more muck on the road, there might be more of an impact on residents. What I'm saying is we do monitor them ongoing. But as members know, on a big building site, the work comes and goes. The work on this site was delayed quite a lot, like many other sites, due to the pandemic. So residents will have seen a lull in proceedings. They won't have seen construction traffic. And then suddenly it'll all have started up again and they'll notice that and it will impact on them. So there will be a degree of disruption and that will come and go. And you as elected members will get your ear bent by your constituents as that happens. But I do assure members that, and it would also be our roads colleagues that would monitor these. They are monitored when they're brought to our attention, and very often, Chair, the developers are actually adhering to the conditions, but the residents might not know that. But that's not to say that we dismiss any issues. We do go out and check, as do our roads colleagues. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you, Pauline.
To you, Chair. Sorry, just to come back on that point then, that's actually not been the case. Wheel washing facilities were supposed to be in at the start of the construction of the road, for instance. The road's been, they've been building it for months now, and it's only now that Transport have went in and said to them that they have to be in place. The complaints have been ongoing for months. I have sent various emails, had various phone calls for months. So what I'm saying is the conditions are not being met. There's been muck on the damn road for months. All the way through Lindsayfield at this point. So I am very frustrated. This is not something that's, well due respect, Pauline, it's not something that has just been noticed. It's been something that's been pointed out for a long time, but it's not been acted on. So again, my question is, what's the point of having a condition? Surely if wheel washing facilities are supposed to be in place, is that not an easy thing to check that they're there? They're now Transport have went in, and thank goodness they went in and they've said they've had to agree where they're going to go. But, several months down the line, that seems a little late to me. But, so is there no way that we can actually check that conditions are being met?
Pauline, do you want to come back in there?
I think it's something that is best taken out of the committee, Chairman. If Councillor Driver just wants to contact myself and the planning officers, we'll work with Rose, we'll look at the specific conditions. I wasn't aware, I have to say, until you raised that just now, that there was issues about wheel washing and so on, Councillor, and it's not something I can just respond to in the committee without checking it out. But if you'd like to take that off piece, we do monitor conditions, we do take enforcement action. Our roads colleagues take enforcement action when it's drawn to our attention. So if you want to take that out with the committee, we will look at it. And we do monitor conditions, we do monitor developers, but you will understand on a huge building site like this, it is a lot of work, but that's not an excuse, and we will do it. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you, Pauline. Tina, did you want to come back in?
Yes, thanks, Chair. I think Pauline's already said it. I think because of the number of, it's not an excuse, but I think because of the number of developers, we have to check the conditions against each development. I wasn't aware that the wheel washing facilities weren't there for that particular development, but we can check. There's a difference between the pre-start conditions and ongoing conditions. What we do is we make sure that before they start that they have implemented the pre-start conditions, and then we have to monitor the ongoing conditions. But if Councillor Driver has raised issues before about modern roads and whatever, I'm not sure which development this is, but we can check that.
Sorry, Chair, can I just come in there, Tina? I'll just tell you, it's the ones that I've emailed you about several times, and it's the main road that's been built, the spine road that's been built to service this whole development from Lindsayfield. I've had responses from you, so kind of confused if you're not really aware of what I've mentioned. So it's part of the road for the community growth area, and it has been raised. Transport, thankfully, have come back, and they are now going in to make sure that they're in place. So if that helps, but I can send you another email if that helps.
Yeah, through yourself, Chair, yeah, I'm aware of issues that Councillor Driver has raised. I just meant in terms of specific developments for each housing developer. That was all, but we can check it.
Thank you, Tina. I'll move the report.
I'll second it, Chair.
Agreed the report?
Agreed.
Thank you. Moving on to agenda item 8 is application P201790. And that's on pages 89 to 100, and that's another one for Bernard. Thank you, Bernard.
Thank you, Chair. This application relates to the parking area affecting a flatted development within the former Station Hotel at 6 Strawfrank Road, Carstairs Junction. The proposal seeks retrospective planning permission for a 3-metre high wall. To the north of the application site and directly adjacent to the erected wall lies a neighbouring property, which already consists of a derelict building without a roof and only high walls remaining. The wall is sited on the boundary of the property with 6A Strawfrank Road, and the applicant is advised that the wall was erected to screen the site from the derelict building. I have referred to a 3-metre wall here. However, what is shown in the initial plans that were submitted to reflect that as-built position, that has been changed following discussions with the agent, and the wall has now been reduced in terms of the proposals to 2.7 metres in height. The application site is located within the existing urban area, and the proposal raises no land use policy issues subject to satisfactory impact on the amenity of the area. In terms of background, directly adjacent to the application site lies 6A Strawfrank Road. This is a derelict premises which were formerly a bookmaker's and fell into disrepair. The roof has been removed and the walls of the building remain. In 2017, planning permission was granted for the siting of a portable building for a hot food takeaway within the walls of the derelict building. During the handling of that application, it was agreed and approved that the remaining walls of the building would be reduced to 2.7 metres in height. In terms of consultation responses, they are summarised in section 4 of the report, and no objections have been raised. There are 6 letters of objection that have been submitted from one individual, and the points raised are summarised in section 5 of the report. Many of the issues raised do not either relate to planning or the specific consideration of this application. Some of the issues raised do, however, include concerns about property maintenance, the impact of the wall on the surrounding area, and its overall impact. The proposal relates to a wall within the parking and amenity area for use by the adjacent flatted dwellings. It is considered a suitable use and type of proposal for the rest surrounding area. The height of the wall is not considered to be excessive at this location, and it will not be overbearing or have an unacceptable visual impact on the amenity of the surrounding area. The objector raised concerns that the proposed wall at 3 metres would be at odds with their remaining wall, which will be 2.7 metres in height. Following discussion, the applicant has now agreed to reduce the wall to 2.7 metres to match the intended height of the neighbouring property. Consequently, a condition is proposed to ensure that the wall is reduced to 2.7 metres in height within an appropriate timescale. It's therefore recommended that planning permission is granted, subject to a condition requiring the wall to be reduced to 2.7 metres. Back to you, Chair.
Thank you, Bernard. Any questions or comments for Bernard? I'll move the report.
I'll second that.
Thank you for the report.
Agreed.
Thank you. Agenda item 9, it's a development plan scheme 2021, and that's on pages 101 to 118. And Tony's going to take us through the item. Thank you, Tony.
Yes, thank you, Chair. So the purpose of this report is to seek committee approval for the South Lanarkshire Development Plan Scheme. By way of background, the 2006 Planning Act requires planning authorities in Scotland to prepare a development plan scheme. And this is to set out the authorities' programme for preparing and reviewing their local development plan and what's likely to be involved at each stage. And this scheme is to be updated annually. As members will be aware, the second South Lanarkshire Local Development Plan, LDP2, was adopted by the Council on the 9th of April 2021. So that sets a context for where we are in terms of our LDP process. The 2019 Planning Act, which received royal assent in 2019, among other things, introduced changes to the development plan system. That includes the need to replace LDPs at least every 10 years now, as opposed to 5 years at the present. And there's also inbuilt in the legislation, obviously approaches to a new style of plan, and also fairly significant changes to the processes involved in preparation. The Act also repeals the ability of councils to prepare supplementary guidance, and it also allows local communities to prepare local place plans for their local area. That's intended to give greater public involvement to the planning of their places. So the 2021 scheme, it's been prepared and it's attached to the committee report as an appendix. I think the scheme highlights that the development plan process is in a period of transition as the detailed requirements of the 2019 Act are brought forward. It's expected that consultation on the draft secondary legislation guidance on the preparation of the new style LDPs will be carried out sometime this month. We thought it was going to happen after the Scottish Parliament elections. And the report will be presented to the Planning Committee in due course on the Council's response. And thereafter, the relevant parts of the Act and the approved secondary legislation will take effect. The government timetable says early 2022. So at this point that the Council can prepare formally its preparation of LDP3. The development plan scheme includes an initial programme for each stage of the process based on what we know, but there isn't an awful lot of detail at the moment until the second legislation is approved. An updated programme will be included in the development plan scheme for 2022, which we will bring to committee next year. It's also noted that the transitional arrangements published by the government last year highlights the expectation that the new form of LTP will have to be adopted by all councils by 2027, so a fairly tight timescale in the circumstances. As I said initially, the Act also repeals the ability of councils to prepare supplementary guidance, which means those existing supplementary guidance documents that sat alongside the previous LDP are no longer part of the development plan. So to address that, first of all, we incorporated policy into LDP2, but we do feel that we need to prepare some non-statutory supporting planning guidance on a range of topics which will support LDP2. And I've listed those in paragraph 4.4. Includes household extensions and alterations, a rural design guide, a design and place guidance, guidance on how we're going to tackle climate change, and also, as we outlined at the recent members session on developer contributions, we'll also be bringing forward some revised guidance on community infrastructure assessment. So, just based on that, Chair, I would ask that members take cognizance of what the development plan scheme as the attachment says, and we ask it's approved and then it's published in accordance with the regulations. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Tony. Any questions or comments for Tony? I'll move the report.
I'll second it, Chair.
Agreed?
Agreed.
Thank you. I don't have any... Sorry, someone's got hands up. Is it John?
Chair, yeah, Councillor Anderson has got his hand up.
No, sorry, that must be a mistake. Something happened to my phone there. No, sorry.
You're on mute.
Chair, you're on mute.
Sorry. I'd like to thank you all for attendance. I don't have any urgent business. So I'll ask you to stop the recording, and thank you again.